All right, in this movie, we're going to return to the task of creating our star logo. And specifically, we're going to match the tops of these two shapes right here to this angled purple J. And we're going to be doing so by skewing the tops of the shapes using the shear tool. And so the first thing we need to do is move the tops of these two shapes upward so that they snap into alignment with this purple guy right here. And just so that I can describe things a little better, I'm going to change his color by clicking on him in order to select him. And then I'll change the fill up here in the control panel to, let's say, this shade of orange. All right, so I'm going to zoom in a little farther so that we can take in our scene. And what I need to do is grab my white arrow tool, which of course you can get by pressing the A key for arrow. And then I'll marquee the tops of these shapes all the way across the top. So I select all 4 of these points. That ends up partially selecting the orange shape as well. To deselect it, just go ahead and press the Shift key and click inside of it twice. The first time you shift click, you'll select the entire shape. The second time you shift click, you'll deselect it. Now what I want to do is drag this guy upward, this left-hand anchor point. And notice I'm pressing the Shift key to constrain the angle of my drag to vertical, and I want to snap into alignment with that shape. But even though I have Smart Guides turned on, I'm not getting a snap. And what that means is I'm going to have to resort to a custom guide. And so I'll go ahead and press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo that change. And I'll go ahead and click inside the orange shape to select the entire thing. And so when you click inside of a filled shape with the white arrow tool, you select the entire path. And then I'll go over to the Layers panel and notice this red square here. I'll Alt or Option drag it onto the Guides layer like so. And that will create a copy of that orange shape on the Guides layer, as you can see right here. Now, to turn it into a guide, I'll right-click anywhere inside the document window and choose Make Guides. All right, now I want you to notice here that I could grab this anchor point, and I'm going to select it independently of the other ones just by clicking on it. And now I'll shift drag it upward until I get a snap. You can see that white snap cursor right there. But I still get the cursor even when I move back and forth. And so what happens is I'm moving that anchor point down and up as I drag to the right and to the left. And that's just no good. I need an exact snap at this location, which means I need to add another guideline. And so I'll press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo that change. I'll click off the path to deselect it, and then I'll go ahead and select my guides layer once again so that I can keep all the guides on that one layer. And then I'll press Control-R or Command-R on a Mac to bring up the rulers, and I'll drag a vertical guide out from the left-hand ruler until it snaps into exact alignment with the left side of that purple shape. At which point I'll release, and then I'll hide my rulers by pressing Control-R or Command-R again. All right, now we want to marquee the tops of these shapes once again to select these top 4 anchor points. Shift-click on the orange shape twice to deselect it, and now notice if I drag this guy up, while pressing the Shift key, I'm going to snap into alignment. I can see a little cross inside my white cursor, which tells me that I'm snapping to the intersection of a couple of guides. And if you're working along with me, notice your heads-up display. It should read DX 0 points because we're dragging the point directly upward. And your DY value will be negative 8.72, if you can make that out. And that just happens to be the way things work. All right, now we want to skew these edges downward, and we're going to do that using the Shear tool. So once again, the Shear tool shares the flyout menu with the Scale tool. So we'll go ahead and select it. And then you want to click right there on that left-hand point in order to position the transformation origin right there. Then move your cursor all the way to the right-hand point and drag down on it. Now, if you drag without any constraint, you're going to modify both the skew angle, which is that S value on top in the heads-up display, as well as the angle of the axis, which is the second value. We want the axis to be exactly vertical, so go ahead and move your cursor over a little bit, and then press and hold the Shift key, at which point that second value will change to negative 90 degrees. Now go ahead and drag this guy down until it snaps into alignment with that custom guide, at which point you should see a skew value, the top value, of negative 162 degrees. Now, you may wonder where that comes from, and I want to explain things so you just understand how this works. And so to make this clear, I'll undo that skew by pressing Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac. And instead of clicking on this left-hand point, I will Alt or Option click in order to bring up the Shear dialog box. Now, if you've been working along with me, then you'll probably see these settings right here, which aren't going to produce any changes at all, and that's because the axis is set to horizontal. We want it set to vertical, so go ahead and select this option. And because I have a negative shear angle value, I'm skewing the edges of these shapes upward. What I want to do is skew them downward, and so I'm going to enter a value of 90 degrees, by the way, just to start off with, because that's up and down after all. And then I'm going to subtract 72 degrees, which is the angle of this yellow shape. You may recall that we've been rotating these shapes 360 divided by 5, which is 72. And so if I press the Tab key now to let Illustrator do the math, it's going to come up with 18 degrees, which is an exact match. This is exactly the effect we want. So why in the world is 18 degrees the same as negative 162 degrees? Well, the reason lies in the fact that when you're skewing, you're starting with 180 degrees. That's the most skewing you can do. From one extreme to the other is 180 degrees. And so if you take 180 and subtract 162, you get 18. And this information, by the way, even though it may seem really techy, is going to come in very helpful in a future movie. And so having entered the proper values, I'll just go ahead and click OK in order to accept that change. All right, now just go ahead and press Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac to zoom out. And I'll press the V key to switch to the black arrow tool, and I will click off my path outlines to deselect them. And that, friends, is how you use the shear tool to skew the tops of a couple of path outlines to exactly match the angle of another one here inside Illustrator.